Week 2 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few wide receivers I've looked to bench this week. The first guy is Brandon Cooks, the Houston Texans. So Brandon Cooks, he had a good week 1 here for the Houston Texans versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. But I think some of this game was a little lucky for Cooks as well. On the week, he had 5 catches for 132 yards on 7 targets versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. With Tyrod Taylor on 1 throw, he didn't even look. He just threw that ball up, and Cooks luckily caught that 50-50 ball, which was like a 45 to 50 yard play there for Brandon Cooks. And this week he's got a tough matchup, obviously, versus the Cleveland Browns, who I got ranked as my #1 defense coming into the week. And we're going to see Denzel Ward shadow him, and Denzel Ward's a good cornerback, in my opinion. So this week I think they're going to take Brandon Cooks out of it, is this Cleveland Brown defense, and make other guys try to beat him, like Pharaoh Brown and Danny Amendola and David Johnson, Mark Ingram, and Lindsey out of the backfield. But right here this week, I don't think Cook comes close to what he did in week 1, and he's a wide receiver I will bench. Second guy is Tyler Boyd of the Cincinnati Bengals. So Boyd, it looks like he's taken a back seat to Jamar Chase already in week 1. Chase cracked 100 yards with a touchdown in that game, and Tyler Boyd in week 1 versus the Minnesota Vikings, only 3 catches, 32 yards on 4 targets. And here in week 2, he's got a good matchup on paper at the Chicago Bears. But right here, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, in my opinion, are quickly moving over Tyler Boyd in targets and obviously in fantasy aspect of things here. So Tyler Boyd, he's been dropped already in 4% of fantasy leagues. I think that's a little premature. Unless, if Boyd doesn't do anything the next few weeks, then he's a guy to drop. But right now, the thing I'm going to do is bench him if you have better options on your fantasy roster than Tyler Boyd, because he's been going down his stats over the last few games, dating back to last season as well, obviously, where T. Higgins stepped up more and where A.J. Green got healthier when he was with Cincinnati. So it's a little troubling to Boyd owners. I own him in 1 league, and I'm on the fence about playing him in 1 league, but I don't really have great options as well. That's just the way it went. But right here, Tyler Boyd, it's going to be tough to trust him at Chicago, even though on paper it's a good matchup, because Joe Burrow, he likes Jamar Chase, obviously played with him in LSU, and T. Higgins was a breakout guy last season for Cincinnati. And also Joe Mixon, he catches some passes out of the backfield as well. So this week, I would bench Tyler Boyd if you have better options. Obviously, the next wide receiver is Robbie Anderson of the Carolina Panthers. So Robbie Anderson, it was pretty much a deep ball, and that's it for him with quarterback Sam Darnold last week, who obviously he played with the New York Jets. So last week versus his former team, I thought Anderson was going to go totally off. But like I mentioned, 1 catch, 57-yard touchdown, and that was it on 3 targets. DJ Moore, he looked pretty solid in that ball game, but it was a Christian McCaffrey show. And what do you expect here? A lot of checkdowns to McCaffrey, him lining up as a receiver at times, and he had 90 yards receiving, I believe, in that game. And here in week 2, it's a tough matchup for Robbie Anderson and the Panthers. The New Orleans Saints here, they look very good in week 1 versus Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers. And when do you see Aaron Rodgers throw 2 interceptions in a game? So right here, I think it could be a tough game for the Panthers all around, where Sam Darnold's going to be under pressure, and he's not going to have time to hit Robbie on the deep ball. Because let's be honest, that Robbie Anderson, yeah, his route running has improved over the last few seasons, but he's still known as a deep threat. If teams could stop him underneath, he's not going to break out for a huge fantasy day. And I think him and Teddy Bridgewater was a better connection than him and Sam Darnold, even though I know it's still early in the year. We've already seen Sam Darnold, like I mentioned, play with Robbie Anderson in his career. And this week, I don't like the matchup, and I don't like the results from Anderson in week 1. So right here, I would bench Robbie Anderson. The next wide receiver is Brandon Aiyuk of the San Francisco 49ers. So Brandon Aiyuk, he cost me a game last week, putting up the old goose egg here. I thought he was going to have a good game versus Detroit, but obviously Deebo Samuel was the man over there for the San Francisco 49ers with a huge fantasy day, going over 180 yards receiving in that one with a touchdown. And Brandon Aiyuk, like I mentioned, had the goose egg. And he wasn't even the starting lineup. Sheffield was the starter here. And Brandon Aiyuk, he's already been dropped in 6% of fantasy leagues. Fantasy owners having no patience at all this season. This week, I'm not going to drop him, and I didn't recommend to drop him in my wide receiver drop edition. So check that out if you need some guys to drop off your roster after waivers have ended. But anyway, Brandon Aiyuk, I'm just going to bench him this week. And if he has another no-show performance then you really consider to drop him after 2 weeks. But last season he got slow out of the gate, and then he broke out with a good rookie year. But right here in week 2 with Philly, I can't trust him. Philly shut down, obviously, all those receivers pretty much for the Falcons. And this week, who knows if Ayuk's even going to start or even play at all really in this game, because he's also banged up with a little bit of a hamstring injury. So this week it's better off to bench Ayuk. And the fifth and final receiver, I would look to bench this week's Will Fuller, the fifth of the Miami Dolphins. So Fuller comes off his suspension here after serving all of it last season except one game where he had to sit out week 1. But week 1, Miami operated pretty decent with Jalen Waddle and Devontae Parker as their 2 top receivers in that ball game. But this week it's a tough matchup versus Buffalo. We saw those great receivers in Pittsburgh not do much at all, and I don't expect Fuller to do much in this game as well versus the Buffalo Bills. This Bill defense, they're tough. They play tight coverage, and Will Fuller is even in shape. I know he had training camp. I think he played in a couple preseason drives as well, but I just can't trust him this week coming off a suspension and coming into a tough matchup. So I think it's a no-brainer. Just have Will Fuller on your bench and see what he does. So that's a few wide receivers I'd look to bench here in week 2 of the fantasy football season.